So welcome everyone. Welcome to today's Blockchain Supply Chain Association's event. I'm your host. My name is Bob. Together with Eric and Andrea, we will you have we wish you a welcome. So it really is a difficult word apparently. And we have two incredible guests actually with us today, Daniel Trabucci and Tommaso Buganza. Yeah, the masterminds behind platform thinking. Before we deep dive into this world of platforms, business to business, partnerships, interactions, maybe supply chain, blockchain, whatever, I think it would be nice actually to ask first Daniel and Tommaso to introduce themselves. So Daniel, could you please kick off?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us here. I'm Daniel Trabucchi. I'm a professor of platform thinking at Politecnico di Milano, so in Italy. And well, let's say that my research mainly focuses on platforms, so we will have a lot of time to actually discuss about it.
And my name is Tommaso Buganza, and I'm professor of leadership and innovation. And this is part of what we will discuss because this is one of the reasons why probably we tried to give a different perspective on platforms. So we look at platforms from the innovation point of view. So as a tool to introduce innovation, you can look at it from different perspectives, and we decided to go for this one.
Okay, very interesting. So that opens basically the open question, like what is a platform and what is platform thinking then?
Well, let me just share a couple of slides to start with that. I would say the following. I think I can even ask you something. Can you just see a couple of images popping up, right? Okay. So I have a question for you, which is, what do you see in this set of pictures? What got your attention? What's the thing that you actually notice?
I just want to be outside with the guy with the mountains. That's what I want to do. I want to be outside.
Bob, Andrea, what do you see?
I see a very nice picture, especially during these days of very hot temperature. It sounds like North Pole. This draws my attention. But basically, daily life. This is what I pick from every picture. Perhaps done everyday life. You see ordering pizza, which is quite common, by the way, in Italy, especially. You see having a taxi. I don't know what the lady's doing. Ordering a film. You see on demand. And other activities, journeys, and stuff like this.
I agree. I see basically my daily life, things which can happen in a way, just ordering a taxi, watching a movie, ordering food and get it delivered at home, but also being monitored or seeing my advances when I do some exercise.
Well, you actually got the main point. Platforms are in our daily life. Behind these pictures, we can find examples like, I don't know, Night Plus or Runtastic, Runkeeper on top on the left. You can think about Netflix, Spotify, Airbnb for the Igloo, Uber, Free Now, Deliveroo, Glovo, and all the others for the various pictures. And we actually created this slide a bunch of years ago with a clear goal to actually say platform-centered in our daily life. Now there is a platform for everything. We even wrote it there. We are leading the platform economy. But as Tommaso was saying, the kind of perspective that we are taking to the world of platforms is slightly different. We come from the world of innovation. And well, if we just freeze the time and go back and we imagine our daily life in 2013, just 10 years ago, we would see basically all the companies I just mentioned actually existing. They were all there, almost all there. But the extreme vast majority of people around the globe were not using these services to go to those daily activities. Some of them were actually already using platforms, but the vast majority of people were probably not. While today, even though there are, let me say, strange guys that are going out running without knowing exactly how many calories or kilometers they burn or run during that session, there are still people that are not using it. But still, vast majority of people are actually on these platforms. And we believe this is the power of platform thinking in a certain way. 10 years for tech evolution are a lot of years. For changing the daily habits of people, well, it's not that long amount of time. And studying innovation, we do believe this is very interesting because it's something, well, it's an organizational setting in a certain way that entered in our daily life, basically in all the aspects, and in a matter of years, literally changed everything. But your question was slightly different. Your question was what is a platform? And for this, I leave to Tommaso the possible answer or story around it.
No, yeah. So actually, what you asked us is exactly what we started from. So we studied platforms for quite a while, and then at a certain point, we tried to give a sort of definition. And it's amazing the quantity of different definitions you can find online. So the first thing we did was the typical thing that everyone does. We asked Google, and so we asked to Google to find how many results can you find for the word platform. And we got to a number, and as usual, so once you get a number, you don't know if it is high, it is low, so you need to have a comparison. So we started to look for other words that are incredibly famous and used in our fields. So, for example, we looked for innovation. So, and Google told us that in a matter of some microseconds, he could get up to 2.18 billion results. Innovation is all over, right? And so we say, okay, what would happen if we use Agile, for example? Well, 0.433, so a lot less, which is strange because we talk a lot about Agile, but it seems that is only us at this stage. And so we went on with the game, and we looked for disruption, or we looked for design thinking. And so you see that there is a little bit of variety. And at this stage, we were able to position platforms. So that was the first research we did. And so once again, it's a small question for you. Where do you expect to find platform? Is it going to be on top of innovation? Is it going to be lower than Agile, somewhere in the middle? Where would you expect to find platforms?
Well, I think it's going to be below Agile. Because it platform, when Bob and Andrea spoke to me about what you were going to talk about, I was absolutely curious, right? Because it's not something that's in my daily vocabulary. So I'm intrigued.
So below Agile. Okay, what about you?
If you would ask me, I would probably put it between disruption and Agile. Still very low.
Okay.
So, and Andrea is still thinking.
Andrea is still thinking about it. So probably is.
I would say disruption, but that's my personal choice. See, I like the word disruption. It's always intrigued me.
So it's
my personal take, though. You see, I'm not an expert into this.
No, well, actually, if you asked us before this research, we would have said, on top of everything, because basically Daniel and I, we spend the large majority of time together, which is a lot, talking about platforms. So if you ask me, in our bubble, platforms are, billions of gazillions of billions and so on. But it seems that anyway, we are not completely alone, because actually the result is quite huge. Is almost 6 billion results. And so this actually, that was a little bit strange for us as well. And so we started to ask ourselves, how is it possible? And the answer is actually pretty simple, because if you look at the word platform, it has got a lot of different meanings. You got the gap between the platform and the train. So that's platform as well. You got the oil pumping, platforms in the middle of the ocean. There is a movie produced by Netflix that is called The Platform. So actually, this is interesting from a semiotic point of view. So we've got a word, and normally we use words because they are a powerful tool to express a specific meaning. But there are some cases in which words are completely abused. So which means that basically, one of the reasons why platforms are so discussed on the internet is because the same word has got too many meanings. Which brings us to a big problem. So what do you, again, so we go back to the initial question, what do you mean by platform? Which, by the way, is interesting because Google, when you put in a word in Google, Google is also prompting you what are the main questions asked about that word. And if you see in the screen, the first question is, what do they mean by platform? So it's not only us. It seems to be a relevant question. So everybody's asking. So what? The strange thing is that all of a sudden we felt ourselves to be they, which is a little bit scary. So we all of a sudden we became they. But then, no, without joking, it's interesting. This means an important thing, that we need to have a definition of platform. Otherwise, it's impossible to go on discussing and understanding what's happening. And it took us many years to try to give a definition to the word platform. So, of course, at the beginning it was easy. So no platform, no gap between the platform and train, not oil pumping platforms, not all of these, no movies and so on. But even if you focus your attention on platforms and innovation, that is what we want to do, the quantity of different meanings that the word platform can have in innovation is huge. So first thing first, we need to be able to start identifying different versions of platforms in innovation, and I can give the word back to you.
Well, we'll try to be very quick. We just want to give you the two main typologies with three labels on top of it that we usually use to talk about platforms. And let's start from probably the widest and biggest case of platform that almost everyone in the planet actually use, which is Amazon. Amazon is a kind of platform, but let me be sincere. We study platforms since 10 years now. We start writing platform thinking, the book 2 years ago, more or less. And Amazon was approached as a case for the very first time when we were writing the book, because the organization is too complicated. So don't think about the whole Amazon company, just think about the marketplace. The marketplace is the best example of transactional platform that we can think of. So that's a platform for a couple of reasons, because it has two customers. There is the stabilizer as a product represented in the image. We are the customers buying it or looking for it. But on the other side, literally on the other side of the platform, there is another customer that is actually buying the chance to reach the final users, which is the seller of that product and other millions of products that are available out there. Transactional platforms have a couple of characteristics that make them very, very interesting from a business model perspective. First of all, they leave the so-called chicken and egg paradox, which make platforms super difficult to be created, because Amazon, the marketplace, without sellers or without buyers, is nothing. That's the same for Uber, for Airbnb, for Booking.com. Thinking about these companies without their customers make them an empty box. And that's the real challenge in setting up a platform. But if you solve the paradox and you start having customers on the two sides, you enter in the virtuous cycle. And well, here the power is amazing. The more customers are there, the more sellers will want to join the platform because they've got more potential buyers, and vice versa. The more sellers, the more things you can buy there, the more you will want to join that platform. These are called cross-site network externalities, and actually kick off the virtuous cycles that let platform grow and prosper in many fields. Just a quick note, this is nothing new. There is an old picture, unfortunately not so old, down on the right, which is the market. The first idea of transactional platform can be traced back in Persia. It was 3,000 years before Christ. The first idea of the market, getting together sellers to get together more buyers, and getting together buyers to get there more sellers, and so on and so forth. So platforms don't need to be digital. Platforms are not an innovation per se, but digital technologies are making them more feasible, more interesting in places where they were not feasible a couple of years ago. But transactional platforms are just one of the typologies of platforms.
If you can stay here for a second. So the interesting thing here is that how does Uber or Airbnb or Amazon make money? So basically, they enable a transaction and they keep a small percentage of this transaction. So there is a flow of money in between two people who really want to be connected, and they make them. So they make them, mesh. They enable the transaction, they keep a part of it. But if we look at different platforms like Google, for example, this is not true anymore. If you think about it, you as a user of Google, you go to Google, you're doing a search engine in this case. So once again, we never focus on the company as a whole. We focus on a specific service that is provided. So it's a marketplace for Amazon in this case, is the search engine for Google. And so the situation is completely different. When you go on Google, you receive an astonishing service. So everyday life of everybody in the world would not be the same without Google. But we don't pay for Google. There's no money flow at all. So we do not give money to anybody. We just use the service for free. How is that possible? Because of course somebody else is paying for it. So I'm pretty sure that you're quite familiar with the idea. So who's paying for everybody is people who want to advertise. So the idea is quite interesting because we still have a platform, but it's a different kind of platform. It's not a transactional platform enabling a transaction between two parties, but it is a platform which is giving two different services to two different customers. The search engine service to me and the possibility to be seen to people who want to advertise. So in this case, I like to represent this like a pond. So there's something, if you want, I never understood why people do that. But if you want to fish, you can go out to the sea to fish and so on, or you can go in places where you got these ponds, typically in the mountain in Italy, you find many places like those. You got a pond and they put a lot of fish in the pond and then they give you the right, the ticket to fish in a pond. And why do you go to fish in that pond? You pay money to go there because you know that the pond is full of fish. Okay, this is happening. I really do not understand the kind of satisfaction, but I mean, this is not the point. I don't want to be insulted by fishermen. The idea of Google, it's the same. So I create a super big pond with billions of people, and I give you the right, and actually you pay for that if you're an advertiser, to be seen by them. And it's pretty simple, it's pretty evident, because when you make a research in Google, the first results that you've got in the list is clearly written that is sponsored, which means this is in the first place, not because it's the most important one. It might be, but it is not the reason why it's in the first place. It's in the first place of the list because it's giving me money for that. This is still a platform. You've got two customers. One of them is paying, the other one is not paying, which is, by the way, similar to Amazon. You do not really pay Amazon. So Amazon is taking part of the money from the seller. You pay the same amount of money if you go for Amazon, if you go another way. So it's basically, you got somebody paying and somebody enjoying a service. We call this typology of platform orthogonal, because you see that now there is an orthogonal side, which is there's not a transaction between them, so it's a different kind of service. Okay? And you will see that there are different typologies of orthogonal platforms. This is a client as a target, because the idea is the one of a pond. So I put a lot of fish together and I give you the right to fish there, to target my eyeballs with your advertising. And once again, as Daniel said before, Google invented nothing from a business model point of view. So how they do create the value, the pond and selling and so on, is exactly the same thing that La Presse, in the 20th century, in the 19th century, did in France. So at a certain point, this is a newspaper, we just said, you know what, we sell the newspaper, we don't make enough money, but we might sell some spaces in the newspaper for advertising. So every newspaper in the world is working this way. So Google invented nothing from the mechanism point of view of course, is done in a digital way, in an incredible way, with the best engineers in the world, and they can reach incredible results. But the mechanism is not new. It's basically something that is magnified by the digital technologies. And there is a third typology of platform.
Well, I'll try to be very quick on this, but we believe this is important because this is actually falsifying one of the things we tend to hear and say the most. Probably each of you is using also some streaming services to see movies and TV shows on top of, let me say, traditional television. And I think you would agree in saying that Netflix was, you know, the opener of this revolution. They actually challenged the traditional field. And Netflix is usually considered a platform, exactly as Spotify is considered a platform. But the two services are completely different. Spotify actually gives you the chance as a creator, as an artist, to go there knocking on their door and to upload your music there. Then if it is going to be streamed, you are going to get little money per each stream. You are actually a customer. You may like it or not as a situation, but you are actually enjoying that service. On Netflix, it's not working like that. On Netflix, you cannot go knocking on their door to actually upload your movie, or better, you can actually do that, but then they will decide if they want it or not. That's a supplier decision. You are actually a supplier to the movie there, and they are going literally to rent your content for a couple of months, years, or whatever it is, to give you an amount of money, and that's it. If everyone will see it or no one will see it, nothing really changed. So this means that Netflix is a linear value chain organization. There are suppliers. They actually work on what they supply, and they actually sell the final result to the market. But as you probably know, Netflix is also producing movies and TV shows. And they tend to do it in a quite effective way. Not every time, but very often in a very effective way. And that's because, yes, Netflix applies a platform strategy that is actually super coherent with what Tommaso was just mentioning. They actually use all of us, not as a target, but as a source of data on the kind of movies we watch, the basket of movies we start, the set of movies we stop after a couple of minutes, the set of movies we go on watching. And they actually put all these data together with other data that are, for example, saying the balancing of the cast of the series, how many females, how many males, how many, I don't know, European people versus American people, whatever it is. They have all this information on how the story flows, on how the characters are actually set. And they do use all these data in an orthogonal way, so aggregating them together, basically even anonymizing them, because the point is not what Bob is looking at. The point is what people like Bob are looking at. And they use this data internally in another function, the movie production function, to actually design new movies and new TV shows, or influence the production, not really to design out of scratch. And this is making it another orthogonal platform with viewers down here and basically the producers up here that are enjoying the value coming from a lot of people on the first side. We've got other examples in which companies are literally selling the data even to external players, always aggregating them, so privacy compliance. And we see again this platform mechanism, because we do have two customers. There are again the externalities. The more people down here, the more viewers, the more those data will be valuable for producers. And also in this case, nothing really new. That's Tommaso's favorite case, so I would give him back the word for that.
Yeah, what you see upright, again, so they did not invent anything. So upright there you see public baths in the Roman time. They are called Vespasianos because the Emperor Vespasiano was the one introducing the public bath. And the public bath were for free. So they were completely a free service. But of course, there was a cost both for building the bath and for managing all the operations that I will not go into the detail of, but it's, can be quite challenging. Why is this an example of I give you something for free because in using it, you're actually creating value for me? Because at that time, the Roman time, of course, there was no plastic. And the main material that was used was leather for the large majority of things, for shoes, for bags, for a lot of things. The main material was leather. And, one of the main elements that was needed to prepare the leather was actually urine. So the idea was, I create a public bath because in this way, I can give it to you for free. You use it, and I am collecting a certain amount of raw material that I can then sell to those who are producing leather. And in this way, actually, I pay back a lot more than I invested in creating this. And I make everybody happy, the producers of leathers and the people living in the city and the people going to the public bathroom. From this, you had, maybe you heard this expression in Latin, that is pecunia nollet. So the money doesn't have any smell. So there was a big, Titus, who was the son of Vespasianus, was strongly against the idea that an emperor was making money with urine. And so there was a big dispute between them. And at a certain point, the answer by Vespasiano was that, urine has got a bad smell, but money doesn't have a bad smell. So you can still do it if you do it properly. Beside the story, the idea is they didn't invent anything, but with digital technologies, you can do incredible things, working on already existing business models. So I would like to add one thing, and then I would like to open the floor to you. You didn't ask anything, which is quite strange. We don't know if we are. In a certain way, we provided you with examples of digital companies. In many cases, they used to be startups, and they are unicorns and so on. In many cases, in Silicon Valley. So it seems that this idea of platforms is connected to the idea of digital startup in Silicon Valley, which is true, by the way. So many of the unicorns, not everybody, but many of the unicorns that we saw in the last years actually are from the Silicon Valley or from other places in the world in which digital technologies are very strong, and they are platforms. But are we sure that the opposite is true as well? So that this platform model can be only used by digital companies, startups, and so on? And the answer to this question to us is no. So probably, and this is what we call platform thinking, probably once you unlock the way of understanding and seeing the platforms around you, once you get to a level in which it's easy for you to see all the different nuances. So Netflix seems to be very similar to Amazon Prime, but it's not. One is a platform, the other one is not, and why? Once you see exactly how they unlock and they use these powerful tools, you can bring these things to existing companies. And this is basically what we think is the current frontier of platforms. Is not to, we are more than happy if anybody is able to create a new Uber. We love Uber. But this is not the point. The point is that probably this way of thinking can be leveraged by existing companies with a lot of resources, with a lot of competencies, with a lot of money to invest, with a lot of relationships in the supply market, the customer market, and so on, to unlock innovation potential that is still not completely used. So this is basically what we make research about.
In a nutshell, we can now say that a platform is something that is getting together different customers. That was actually shorter, But we believe that without all these, nuances and examples, it would be actually difficult to understand why we believe there is so much potential around this concept.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That was very enlightening. Although my answers that I gave at the beginning of the conversation were absolutely wrong, especially especially with that, what, 5 something billion results of platform. I think I'm starting to get it. So let me ask you this first question. If and in our worlds, in the blockchain and supply chain worlds, we talk a lot about empowering smallholder farmers, for example, right? Small farmers in Africa or in South America that today don't have the same value than a big corporates. What would you tell a smallholder farmer to think about from a platform perspective, right? What would be the spark that they should look for when thinking about platform thinking, if they want to bring more value to what they do?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Eric. And you are also touching one industry, let me say, where we found probably the greatest case, one of the greatest cases of platform thinking, which is John Deere. So this ability to actually see an established firm, the basis upon which building a platform transformation. Let me be briefly answer going through their case. We're talking about probably one of the biggest manufacturers in the world of agriculture machines that few years ago now, I think almost a decade ago, started a digital transformation process, which is usually the trigger point for established firms looking for digital opportunities. And they actually created what is usually called an ecosystem, but we prefer the word platform because it's highlighting the role that the various stakeholders or customers actually have within that system, that put at the center the farmer. In that case, very briefly, what they've done, they actually filled up the machine, the tractor, with sensors that are gathering data on what happened in the soil. And they then developed a set of services that is putting the farmer at the center and other stakeholders, other actors of the value chain that can get value out of this system. We're talking about fertilizer producers, seed producers, and many other actors of what used to be a linear value chain that are now part of this more complex system in which they are all creating and getting a bit of value out of it. You know, this is a case that, in my opinion, is very powerful to show that platforms can literally happen everywhere. So probably thinking about an established firm like John Deere and then thinking about Airbnb, there are a few differences. It's B2B, it's established firm, it's art tech driven in a certain way, it's legacy oriented. But all these things can actually lead up to a transformation that starts from the asset they have if they are seen through platforms. You were actually talking about the farmer, so smaller firms in a certain way. And what I was saying was actually an established firm that provide different opportunities to those smaller entrepreneur or firms. I do believe that having a platform thinking approach can open up opportunities also to smaller firms. Maybe setting up platforms, in other cases, probably joining established platforms and understanding that these mechanisms where you end up literally seated next to your competitor in many cases is actually an opportunity to enlarge the market, to enlarge the industry, rather than to actually suffer from direct competition. And I believe that established firms that open up these avenues, this different way of thinking, can actually lead to even more opportunities and occasions for smaller firms thinking about platform opportunities.
So what do you see as the downside to a potential platform between competitors, as you just mentioned?
You know, the downsides of platforms are a lot, as in anything we can actually discuss about. Just to mention some of the recent topics that have been on the news, we've seen scandals related to privacy based on the data used by platforms. We heard stories about platforms that centralized in a very powerful way the power of the entire system, getting gigantic margins, leaving very little to the other parties. And we could go on for hours probably mentioning cases and difficulties there. My opinion is that the point is not really what's the downside of the model, is basically how you use it. The model is neither good or bad. The point is how you set it up.
Yeah, and I think that this is a strong point, and it's possibly one of the biggest differences between Europe and America, US. I don't know exactly where Canada is positioned, so you will help me out here.
Just north of.
So we in Europe, it seems that we strongly believe in a little bit harder regulation in general. And so we can see it on platforms. We're trying to do that. We can definitely see that, for example, in the case of AI, we started quite soon in this case. So we started to discuss the regulation of it quite soon. I completely agree with Daniel. The model itself is not bad or good. Also because the model is can be traced back to the Vespasiano. So it's not really the model of the problem. The point is that we are letting some companies to get a size that is definitely too big. So too big means two different things. The first one is that it's easy when you are so powerful in an industry to win on another industry. There is a super famous case in China, for example, where Alibaba at a certain point, they decided to create a service which was quite similar to PayPal. And because, I mean, they already had a huge amount of customers, and in a very short amount of time, they became one of the biggest financial operators in China. So they acquired a quantity of customers in a matter of a blink of an eye that would have been impossible for another bank to do. So the problem is that you can see, I mean, if you are working in any industry and you know that Amazon is thinking about, I don't know, to start delivering drugs to the door to door to people. Wow, so you're doomed. So it's terrible news for you, which means that probably the size is becoming, so after a certain level, the size is becoming too much, and too much needs to be regulated a little bit. So this is my point, which is not only my point, because even if you remain in the United States, and if you go to, I mean, not really a very, very left, environment like Harvard Business School, you find in Harvard Business School that some scholars are explicitly talking about value creation, value capturing, but also value sharing. So there is an imperative for these companies to distribute part of a huge value that they are internalizing to the other elements of the ecosystem, because finally this is going back to the people. So I think that this is a huge point of discussion that need to be tackled, and it's very difficult because we let them grow so much, but now it's difficult to tell them what they can do, what they cannot do. So it's in the moment in which you've got some companies with a capitalization which is higher than an average state in Europe, which is definitely the case for some of the super known companies. Now to regulate them is going to be, but it's going to happen anyway. So I think that we need to go there somehow.
Very interesting. And
So,
go ahead, Bob.
yeah,
You
I'm
raised your
sorry
hand
to interrupt,
first.
interrupting to you, Eric. In the beginning, we also used the wording innovation and agile. We saw a great example also of John Deere, which moved away from just transactions. It did much more. So in my opinion, platforms give huge opportunities due to the various types of resources, the participants, to actually create value beyond the limits of a normal company. So you can create and solve issues, complex problems which are not out there. Can you give you some more examples of that which are out there and actually could be related, for instance, to the field we're actively interested in, trade and supply chains? Do you have some examples on that?
Well, you go far beyond transactions. You are right. We've seen cases in literally any industry we can talk about, whatever. We've seen cases in the health industry. We've seen cases in the aerospace industry. And in many cases, the point was related to data. And I think that is opening up the transformation potentially to every aspect that deals with something digital. So basically with everything. Tommaso was actually referring to a case. You want to go for that?
Yeah, we might make a difference between what we call data-driven epiphany and what we call data-driven innovation. So what is a data-driven epiphany? At a certain point, you are running a service and all of a sudden you realize that you got a huge amount of data. That could be the case of John Deere. So they did not collect the data in order to create a platform. They started collecting data in order to create advanced services for the farmers. And then all of a sudden they had an epiphany. Oh, we could use it in a different way. We got within our suppliers, somebody who might become our client because of the data we have got. And this is in a certain way not designed. It's just happening, it's emerging, it's an epiphany. It's a different case, the one of data-driven innovation, but it's the case in which you start from the problem that you want to solve, and you create a platform to collect exactly the data that you need to solve the problem. So in a certain way, when we think about, let me say, Twitter, so we know that you can also use the tweets for the sentiment analysis, you can sell the tweets and so on. But basically, the idea was we create Twitter, and then all of a sudden we understood that there was something more. When we talk about data-driven innovation instead, we completely revert the mechanism. We do not start from the service that we give for free, but we start from the data that we want to collect. Once we identify the data, we need to identify who can be the provider of the data. Once we identify the provider of the data, we need to create a service that is so amazing for them and is based exactly on those data. So they are more than willing to give me that data, not because I'm stealing them, because I'm giving you a service back. And in order to have the service, which is leveraging exactly the data that I need, you give me the data and I put all of them together and I got the answer. So there's a brilliant case in the healthcare industry connected to the Parkinson disease. So research in Parkinson is connected to basically I'm not an expert of Parkinson's. I'm not, of course, I'm not an expert in the field. But as far as I understood, this kind of disease cannot really get better, is degenerative. What you can do is to slow down the process. So that is the best thing that you can imagine. And part of the physical activities that you do might help to slow down the process, which means that there are many researches about what are the things that you want to do, you need to do, and so on. So it was created an app which is actually asking you to do different kinds of exercises with the fingers. And what do you get back? You get back actually the evolution of a disease for you. So this is something you do for you. and you're absolutely, it's absolutely clear that you're doing that for you, but you're also giving me the data that if it is the data of a single individual is not very relevant, but I can propose different exercises to different groups of people, and I can compare the results in the long term, and I can help research. So there is a typical example in which you reverted the logic. So it's not an epiphany, oh, we got data, let's make money out of it. It is a pretty more complicated thing. So you need to start from the problem, the data that you need to solve the problem, and how you now create something that people will want to use. And in doing it, it's like the Vespasiano. They want to use, and in doing it, they actually live on the ground. And this is absolutely legal, and it's written, and it's very, very, very well said, that you are giving me some data that I will use for something else to close the loop in another direction. So I think that this is one of the most promising way of using this kind of models once you understand how they work.
And I think it does a really nice, interesting point. Yeah, it's all about data, and it can have two different entry points of how you actually start looking at it. Artificial intelligence will help us a lot also in recognizing it. For instance, what you said also with Parkinson, seeing certain patterns which we are unable to discover ourselves currently. We can use that also in supply chains, etc. We're also interested in another technology, which is blockchain. So what you currently see is you see platforms where it's extremely centralized, while blockchain in theory would have a much more decentralized view, where me as a data owner are much more in control of what I want to do with my data and who I share it with. So what would you think is the effect of that on platforms? How would that actually change? Will it change?
This is yours.
You know, I think you are touching to 2 points in these questions that are quite central in the way in which we are presenting platform thinking. I would say probably a bit because of the kind of research we've been doing, and a bit just because it went like that. We tend to have mainly cases in B2C environments rather than in B2B. But there are cases in the B2B environment that can get more relevant for supply chain scholars, practitioners, managers, and so on and so forth. And this is the first point I'd like to touch. Everything we discussed so far, everything can actually open up opportunities also for players of a supply chain and for B2B environments. We are seeing this happening that can go from B2B marketplaces to more data-related opportunities that Tommaso was mentioning. And this goes back to what we were saying at the very beginning with the picture of the various photos on the daily life. It's incredible, but in the end, even if we perceive it as difficult, changing in our daily life, we tend to do it more easily than what we do in our professional life. Because engaging organizations in change, it's even more complicated. But we do believe that platform thinking can open up a lot of opportunities there. And we hope that having this kind of chat can actually help in that. But in this regard, blockchain is helping us. We actually did a study on the impact that blockchain can have on platforms. And the basic results we got is that probably this is a technology that can enhance the idea of platforms, because it's basically getting into the technology some of the activities that the platform provider is usually said to be performing. Just to say, when enabling trust between the parties, it actually entered directly in the idea of the blockchain itself, and enable even different kind of externalities that can be leveraged. Now it's a bit gone now, but the idea of the ICO and this idea of investing in the community was actually super coherent with the idea of these virtuous cycles that are at the basis of platforms. Indeed, what happened studying the impact of blockchain on platforms, we happen to see many more B2B cases than what we usually did in our, let me say, traditional previous studies on platforms. It seems like blockchain was maybe a cooler topic or a cooler thing in the supply chain world than the platform concept was, even though now we are sometimes seeing cases in which the blockchain is actually put at the center, but the characteristic of the technology that are actually leveraged are somehow poor. And said in a different way, that same idea could have been put in place with a, let me say, normal platform. So in my opinion, blockchain is a door opener for this type of transformations, but it would be interesting if these open up, if these open the door also for more general platform transformations in the supply chain world and in the B2B world.
Right. If I may add a thing, there's another study that we didn't publish yet. So we are reasoning about it because it's
you raise now curiosity, Tommaso. You're mastering doing this. You could change. You will be asked to provide more information.
And the reason why we didn't publish it yet is because I didn't write my part, so it's fully my fault.
So looking forward to.
No, but it's I think it's super interesting, the possible connection we can. So let's start from the App Store. Right? So once upon a time, Steve Jobs launched the App Store, and before that, actually, the world was completely different because there were providers of services, and if you were a big provider, you had engineers, you had production, you had distribution, you had the brand, you had advertising, and so you would have win. So this was probably because you were good, but also because you had some, complementary assets that allowed you to win on the market because you were just big and very good. Okay, the App Store actually created that situation in which a small, group of 3 people in Finland, I think, could create a game. Throwing birds and become very famous. Okay, and why is that? Because actually it linearized the market. So everyone had a single page. You could be very powerful, but the same amount of space that was given to Microsoft, it was given to Roxio, and the mechanism was the same. So the fees of a credit card, where the trust of a credit card was managed by Apple and stuff like that. So in a pre-App Store world, nobody would have ever given that credit card information to these 3 guys in Finland. So they actually created a situation in which they positioned back the innovative power at the center of a system. If you do something that is very cool, you will win, not just because you're big. And I think that in a certain way, the blockchain might have a similar impact on platforms. Because, today, if you really want to rent a room somewhere, you go on Airbnb. And why you do that? Well, first of all, because everybody who has got a room to rent, they go on Airbnb. It's great. But then also because they gain the trust. So they take the money, they don't give the money before you said it's okay. If there is a dispute, typically they pay both of you. So they take care of the fact that everybody is super happy and so on. So there is this very strong trust point of view that could be enabled by a blockchain. So if I now position a similar service on a blockchain, I can completely trust everything that is connected with the transaction, with the quality, with the reviews, and so on. So in a certain way, part of a big value that is provided by these big platforms is going to be linearized, is going to be democratized. So everybody will have the same. So at that point, you can go to start a fight against Uber or against Airbnb if you are proposing services that are just better. So I think that there is a huge potential for innovation in platforms because some in the blockchain, using the blockchain, because the blockchain is somehow removing the complementary assets. So it's democratizing the world of platforms. So well, I don't know if this is going to happen for real, but this is what we foresee in the future.
Very interesting trend description, Tommaso. And if I may reflect on that myself, I kind of agree with you in that perspective. I think one of the most important parts is first the step of digitalization that helps already creating platforms and having the data there, exchanging, creating new value, and being more agile, creating innovation in itself as well. Blockchain could be an add-on as well, where they create this trust layer. You don't need it for everything, as you mentioned, Daniel. There are so many propositions out there. We see a number of them failing last year as well, where the technology didn't really add anything else. It was not required. So if you then have a platform which could be all traditional and a digital layer on top of it, and maybe something if it is required trust, we create so much opportunities out there and help each other so much. So
Love the
I'm
idea,
personally
though.
very happy with the thought of platform thinking, that it is so powerful to understand the concept, because it opens up a completely new world. Sorry to interrupt you, Andre. What do you?
No, I love the idea of democratizing the aspect of democratization, that come from the world of supply chain finance and trade finance. You see nowadays how fully democratic, let's say, so and inclusive is that one. So talking about a trade finance gap, maybe you heard about these, Daniel, because most of the deals, most of the companies are not included in the bigger picture. So how to apply this platform thinking model to this very traditional world? The key is democratization, in my own view. So that's really something new in terms of thinking that could open up to some interesting perspective, and especially blockchain has a defining role in doing this. What's been done so far, Bob, this, my thoughts into this are totally okay. Turning something and paper format into digital form with what's the addition in terms of value? Not that much. So I mean, that's good.
I have no more questions. I don't know if you have anything to add, Andrea.
No, that's the only thing I could add. It was really interesting conversation.
So with that, I also certainly want to thank you, Daniel and Tommaso. I would also invite everybody who wants to understand a little bit more about platform thinking, please read their book. It's lying there, hopefully. It brings really a lot of information. They also have a splendid website called platformthinking.eu, if I'm correct. So please have a look at that and reach out to them if you have any other interesting thought or would like to have some help, because it's such a powerful tool to start using this type of thinking completely in your role and understand what your role could be. So thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Tommaso.
As an Italian, I'm proud of this being fostered in Italy, although a few miles away from my place. My invitation is to, let's say, utilize this session as a kickstarter for future discussions. This is just the beginning. So you see, expanding under the supply chain, trade finance perspective more in the future will be highly appreciated, guys. But first of all, thanks for being with us today. It was really, really insightful session.
So thank you for having us. It was very nice chatting with you. So thank you.
You're welcome.